Hello, biology. It's another day of wonderful note taking. This is really important stuff. It's really interesting stuff. You just watched a video about stem cells, and this is something that hopefully you all will benefit from in your generation, whereas in my generation I may not get so much benefit from it, but hopefully with yours you'll see a lot more good use of stem cell therapy for problems that you might have as you age or need some replacement parts. So a lot of writing. I'm going to just go fast with this video. So Miss Rhonda, whenever they need to stop to catch up, that's fine. Please copy the standard down. SB1B, we're still on that first standard, but we need to be able to notice these keywords: develop and use models. Okay, that doesn't mean me developing and using models. That means that you all are supposed to be able to take the information that you know, develop and use models. So we'll practice more with that. But we want to be able to, we want you to be able to explain the role of cellular reproduction in maintaining genetic continuity. Okay, so cellular reproduction, it means cells reproducing. This is not all going to be covered today. This is a couple days worth of notes right here, and doing some things in class. But maintaining genetic continuity. When something is continuous, it continues on. So what we need is for any species to be able to reproduce and have more of its species, because if a species does not reproduce, then it goes extinct. So we really need to understand a lot about cellular reproduction. Okay, you do not need to write this slide down, so don't write it down. It's just sort of what you're going to be able to do. But I think this is really exciting because it's something that you are going to know more than your parents are going to know. There's a lot of questions about this new technology of stem cells, and I think that you're going to be finding that you can answer questions that your parents might ask you. Or things that they might be wondering about. So, a stem cell. The great thing about a stem cell is that they're just these blank slates, and when an egg and an embryo when an egg is fertilized by the sperm, it creates an embryo. Okay, so you've got this blank slate, and there's something special about these cells that says, okay, we're going to divide, and then when we get to a certain point, then we're going to start specializing. So after so many stem cells are made that are blank, we're going to start making liver cells, muscle cells, blood cells, brain cells. So, but for the first so many divisions that that fertilized egg has, it just keeps producing these blank cells because it has to have so many blank cells in order to branch off and start making all the different muscle tissue, fat tissue, eyeballs, ears, nose, mouth, all that other stuff. So they're really neat. And scientists have found that if we could take these blank cells, say that I need my eyes, say I'm going blind, my retina is messed up. Well, once those nerves and everything go bad, I just can't get them replaced. But if they can make my stem cells into more retina cells, those could be put right back in my eye and they would work. So that's kind of where they would like to go with this. So it's really a new frontier in medicine. Okay, write this down. Write this down. All of this. Stem cells are body cells that have the ability to divide and renew themselves for long periods of time and develop into a variety of specialized cell types. Write all of that down. That's your definition of stem cells. Now we've got different classes of stem cells. So we can break down these words into our word parts. The first class, totipotent, and this is your fertilized egg. That fertilized egg as soon as the sperm digs its way into the little egg, you've got that fertilized egg, that zygote. We'll learn that term later, but that's called totipotent. And this gives, so now you have two halves making one whole cell here, and it's just a complete blank slate, and it's going to make more complete blank slates. Okay, so it's totally a blank slate, a totipotent class. All right, the next class, pluripotent, like plural, more than one. Okay, so your embryonic stem cells. When the egg is fertilized, you have a completely blank cell, a completely blank slate, and after so many divisions of this completely blank slate, we can now consider this to be an embryo, and this embryo has a bunch of these blank cells that can then specialize to any type of cell. So the third class was that multipotent cell, and these are the adult stem cells. So these can be taken out of us because we do have some stem cells in our body, and they can give rise to the closely related cells. Like, for example, they talked about leukemia, being able to take the blood cells, the stem cells from the bone marrow, and use that to treat patients with leukemia. So we have some stem cells in our body, but they're specific to the organ or the tissue that they came from. So they can't just make any new cell. So like, you can't take an adult stem cell from a liver and make a new neuron to put in the brain. You can't do that from an adult stem cell. But from an embryonic stem cell, you have the ability to take an embryonic stem cell and kind of, I guess, program it and tell it whatever it needs to be and make more of those pieces and parts. Now, this gives you a little bit of a visual about how this works, but you'll just see that the sperm fertilizes the egg, and then you've got all these blank cells. They're dividing and dividing. These will turn into other type of stem cells. So we can take from this point, like the video that you watched talked about stem cells being donated from people who go to fertility clinics. When you go to a fertility clinic, you might have several eggs fertilized, but they only implant some of those eggs. Not all of them get implanted. Well, instead of just throwing the other fertilized eggs out, they can be donated willingly by the owners of those eggs to work with these stem cells. Okay, now, so these embryos that are formed, from here they can be isolated and in a lab turned into other stem cells, or if they're left in the body to grow into, a viable fetus, then they will divide within the body to make all the pieces and parts of a human. They can take the blood from this umbilical cord and get some what's called hematopoietic stem cells. Okay? And so if blood is withdrawn from here, we can still get those stem cells and make several different things from it. So there's obviously going to be some ethical concerns here. You might even be generating some conversations among yourselves or asking some questions. And we will be talking more about this later. Right now, I just want to make sure that you get all of the information written down while I'm gone. But we will explore some of the ethics behind this because it's really an interesting area. You've got a lot of things that you're going to be voting for within your lifetime. But there are a lot of potential benefits here. For example, if a person has brain damage, we don't usually recover from brain damage. But if we could take stem cells, then we can possibly come up with ways to recover from brain damage or recover vision. People who have Alzheimer's, this might potentially help them to, regenerate the brain cells so that they can remember things and have a better quality of life. So, potential benefits, please write this down, that when we study adult stem cells, we can better understand how these tissues develop and what goes wrong when they become diseased. In order to treat a disease, we have to know what we're up against. So one of the benefits of stem cells is that we begin to see how these tissues develop. We can possibly use them to grow human tissues, to replace human tissues, and replace those specific tissues that we don't generally replace. So please copy all of those down. And please copy all of these down. Embryonic stem cells, they can be grown indefinitely, meaning that if we get a strain of these embryonic stem cells, we can make more and more. They can be used to replace healthy cells, replace tissues. So please make sure you copy all of that down. I know it's a lot of writing. Now, there are challenges. You have to really get a lot of education to be able to work in this area, obviously. But even if you create more brain cells to help somebody who has Alzheimer's, you have to get it to the right area of the brain to do some good. Also, anytime you put something into the body, there's that possibility of rejection. So please make sure that you write all of these down. And another thing is that whenever you have cells growing and growing, there's we have to suppress tumors, meaning that we have to keep tumors from forming and growing. Now, ethical challenges. Make sure you write this down, and we will do some activities and we will talk more about this because it's really interesting. But others believe that some types of stem cell research violates ethical standards and are not justified by the potential benefits. Okay. So, a lot of people feel very strongly that we're playing God here, and that we should not be messing around with something that could have the ability to turn into, a human child. And that's what that ethical challenge is. So you get into that discussion. Well, what do you do with these fertilized eggs? Because when you go to a fertility clinic, again, I don't know how many eggs they fertilize, but they fertilize a whole bunch of eggs. And then they keep them on ice, basically. They keep them frozen. They implant so many of them. And sometimes a woman, the implants will take, and she will carry that child to full term. Or sometimes she has to go back multiple times and get more eggs implanted in her. But at any rate, they take a whole bunch of eggs and fertilize them and keep them so that she doesn't have to keep going and getting the eggs, I guess, taken out of her. So technically, what do you do with this? You've got these fertilized eggs that could turn into babies, possibly, and we're keeping them on ice. So some people, make the decision to donate them to research, and it brings up ethical questions. So please make sure you write that down, and we will talk more about this, and pretty interesting stuff. So when you use these fertilized eggs, in order to harvest these stem cells, the egg is in a petri dish, and the scientists are taking the stem cells out of them. And so that means that this embryo will not grow to full term to be a child. But it wouldn't have grown to full term either sitting on ice indefinitely in a lab. If the mother never puts it back into her body, because, if, for example, if you go to get, how do I say this? If you go for fertility treatments and you conceive a child, some of those people you've seen on TV where they have like octuplets and sextuplets and quintuplets and all that, because they put multiple embryos into your body. Well, sometimes they take and sometimes they don't. Sometimes you get multiple births and crazy numbers of children being born. Well, obviously, if a woman goes to fertility treatments and she has these embryo, she's probably not going to use all of them. She may have a child or may not have a child from the one she has, and at some point, these embryos are not going to be used. So this is where we have these ethical questions. All right, once the embryo produces these embryonic stem cells, they can culture them, take them out, and then, use them to make whatever kinds of tissues are needed. So in summary, make sure that you're writing this down. This is very, very important. Something, before we get into these ethical discussions, I want you to know what's going on. And we will have these ethical discussions. But stem cells are undifferentiated cells that can regenerate themselves and develop into specialized types of cells. You got 3 types. There's the totipotent, the pluripotent, and the multipotent stem cells. Remember, the multipotent are the stem cells that are within our bodies as adults. And stem cells offer the hope of understanding basic cell processes and treating the dreaded diseases, but a lot of technical and ethical issues do surround that. So please write this down. I'm excited to get back and do some activities and talk about some of these things, because no doubt you're already having discussions. Y'all have a great day.